Hey everyone, it's James coming here on a live stream. It's approximately, wow, it's after 10:30. I gotta get this moving. But I wanted, or is it? No, it's 9:30. I'm sorry, 9:30. I wanted to come on, and I'm trying to keep these daily if I can. So I did one last night. I'm trying to do one tonight. This is the series I've started doing on Yahweh's commandments. And if you've missed the beginning of this last night, I have that up on my Facebook page, and it's also now up on my YouTube channel. So you can go check that out if you want. Basically, my aim with this series is to go through point by point and look at every single commandment given in the Torah, given in the law, from Exodus on through Deuteronomy, and look at it and see from the standpoint of a believer in Christ in America 2020, can we or can we not keep those commandments? Because that's one of the things that we hear in Christianity over and over and over again is that the law is too hard to keep. So, we can't keep the law. It's impossible. So Jesus kept the law flawlessly, so now we don't have to. So my goal with this is to take a look and see, is that true? Can we actually not keep the commandments? Like, is it impossible for us to keep these commandments even though we were given them and told to keep them? So I'm going to read a couple scriptures first to get this started from the New Testament, to kind of support my, show you my motivation for why I'm doing this, just to kind of make it crystal clear why I'm embarking on this study. I'm going to start off in Matthew chapter 5. This is the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? I'm going to start reading in verse 17. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Do not think that I came to abolish the law, the Torah, or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or stroke shall pass away from the law until all is accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But, and this is the important part, whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So that's my motivation for doing this. I'm teaching the commandments, okay? I haven't really gone into this type of a teaching before because I've never really considered myself a teacher. But this is important. And especially if you believe that we're in the end times, there's another layer to it. And I referenced this in the teaching last night. I'm going to quote it. I'm going to actually read it from the book of Revelation tonight. Revelation chapter 14. And it's duplicated in a few spots in Revelation. But I'm just going to read Revelation 14 and verse 12. Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus, or the commandments of Yahweh and their faith in Yahshua. And just as a brief sidebar, if this is the first time you've ever tuned into anything, any one of my streams or videos, you just heard me use a couple terms there. I our Creator by His actual name, which when you read your English Bibles, you'll see capital Lord in the Old Testament specifically. That refers back to His actual given name, which is Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. The letters are in Hebrew, and the best we can tell, that's pronounced Yahweh. Okay. Same goes for Jesus. His name would not have been Jesus. I know that that's common to call him that now, but Jesus as a name was an impossibility when he was born. His Hebrew name was spelled with 5 letters, Yod-Heh-Wah-Shin-Ayin. There's different variants on how to pronounce that. I'm going with Yahshua, but there's also variants like Yehoshua. Yeshua is kind of a shortened form of that. In the English, you could even transliterate it as Joshua. It's the same 5 letters that spell that name. So you're going to hear me use those names as we go through this, and that's why, if you're unfamiliar with any of my videos here, okay? So here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commandments of God, of Yahweh, and their faith in Jesus. Now, there's 2 parts to that equation. The commandments of God and their testimony in Jesus, okay? Their faith in Jesus, okay? So they're both. So Christianity, in my opinion, has the latter. They've got that nailed, but they've completely ignored the former. Just like the inverse, the Jews have the former down, the commandments, even though they've twisted it and messed it up, but they don't have the latter. They don't have the second part of the equation. So if you believe that we're in the last days, like I do, and you want to be called a saint, you need both of those parts. And so that's what I'm doing here is we're walking through these commandments to try to get that first part down, the commandments of God. What does that mean? How do we do that? Because if you're not keeping the commandments of God, by this definition, you can't be reckoned a saint. That's not me talking, that's the Bible talking. Okay? So last night I did started off. There are commandments that precede Mount Sinai, but just for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm starting at Mount Sinai, and that's Exodus 20. So I read that last night, and I'm going through point by point, and I'm just looking. Can we keep this commandment? Is it impossible for us to keep? And I'm trying to avoid the theology. I'm trying to avoid, the theological implications of keeping a commandment. I'm just looking strictly at, can we keep the commandment? Is it possible? I think our cat's trying to get in. And speaking of cats, you probably hear some noise in the background. I'm sorry for that. We're kind of in this weird spot with the season change here to where if I turn the air conditioner on, it's going to get too cold, plus that's noise. So I have the windows open and I have the fan on, and that keeps it just right, but there's a lot of crickets outside. So you'll probably hear that, and I apologize for that. Okay, so Exodus chapter 21. I'm just going to read through them with me if you want, and we're just going to go point by point. So let's go. Now these are the ordinances which you are to set before them, talking to Moses. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th year he shall go out as a free man without payment. If he comes alone, he shall go out alone. If he is the husband of a wife, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife and my children, I will not go out as a free man, then his master shall bring him to Elohim. Then he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him permanently. Okay, so that's one general commandment on how to deal with I guess, a slave, realistically. Okay, so let's break this down. First off, this is talking about if you buy a Hebrew slave, they serve for 6 years. On the 7th year, the year of release, they have the option to go free. And then he goes into requirements on, they can, if they have sons or daughters, if they have, a wife, things like this. But the basic part of this is, can we keep this commandment? So just looking, and this is going to sound weird, I know, in 2020 America, but let's do this. Can you buy a Hebrew slave? Can you? In 2020 America, no, you can't. Not only that, you can't buy any slave. Now, I'm talking legally. People do this, we know. We know that there are people that actually do buy slaves, usually of the sex slave variety. That's a big thing right now. Avicii even did a music video about it. You can look it up. Maybe don't watch it with the kids because it's a little bit dark. I think it's called For a Better Day or something like that. But I mean, here's a mainstream pop star bringing attention to it, okay? But in other countries, Arab countries, they own slaves, adult slaves. So it's still something that goes on out in the world. It's not something that was just only in America, and it's not. That's not how it is, okay? But just looking at this commandment, can you buy a Hebrew slave? Most likely not, okay? In the event that you could somehow buy a Hebrew slave, then the rest of the details of this commandments would kick in, okay? As far as the year of release and things like that. But chances are you're not going to be able to buy a Hebrew slave in 2020 America. So, in my opinion, this is one that we can't keep. Okay, even if you wanted to, you couldn't keep it. Okay? So, okay, there we go. Pretty easy, right? Let's move on. Number 7, verse 7. If a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. If he will not do these 3 things for her, then she shall go out for nothing, without payment of money. So this is a similar concept. If a man, this is talking about the sale of a daughter as a female slave, and then all the stipulations that go along with that. So the fundamental question is, in 2020 America, can you sell your daughter as a female slave? Yes, you can, technically, like I just mentioned. You could do that on the black market. Okay, is it legal? No. Okay, if you did, you would be thrown in jail. Unless you have connections, like we see with some of these guys, but generally speaking, for the common person, if they were to do this, they would be thrown in jail based on the laws of the land. So on a technicality, you can keep this commandment. Okay, you could. Now, am I saying to do this? No. Because if a man sells his daughter, so this is not saying that you have to, okay? This is not a commandment saying you have to sell your daughter. But if a person, and this was much more common obviously back at that time, to do this, if you did it, then here are the rules, okay? So if you're choosing not to sell your daughter as a slave, which you don't have to do, then this is a commandment that you don't have to keep. Nothing at all here you have to keep, okay? So this is one of those commandments that if you're looking for stuff to do, you can skip this one. You don't have to do this, and I don't really see how you could in 2020 America, okay? Let's keep going. Verse 12. He who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint you a place to which he may flee. If, however, a man neighbor so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar that he may die. Okay, so there's a few things to look at here. When you strike a person and you kill that person, you shall surely be put to death. Okay, now there's two parts to this. Okay, now if I were to go out and strike somebody down and kill them, okay, the death penalty comes to me. Now, since this is a Torah commandment, the assumption is that it would be judged by the system of judges that are put in place later in the Torah, the 70 judges, okay, with witnesses and the whole thing. Now, in 2020 America, even if I had that going on, even if I had witnesses, even if I had, 70 Bible-believing, judges, I could not do this. You or I could not do this. We couldn't, if somebody kills somebody, we can't just go out and have a payback killing or whatever, right? We can't do it. It would have to go through the U.S. legal system, through the courts, and then the courts would decide how that proceeds. Now, the courts obviously have the option to pass a death penalty in most states, but it would have to go through them. Okay, so this death penalty here is not a commandment that you or I as individuals can keep. This one in 2020 America falls in the hands of the United States justice system or whatever country you're in if you happen to be listening from abroad. Okay, and he gives a couple of things here. If he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, and then he talks about the cities of refuge that he establishes later. There's 3 on each side of the Jordan. Okay, so again, we don't have those cities of refuge available to us right now. So even if you were to kill somebody, but not preemptively, not with intent, then you can't keep that commandment because you can't go to those cities of refuge. Okay. Verse 15: He who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Now, this is one of those. Yes, you could keep this commandment in 2020 America. If you knew a kid, and I don't know, and there's debate, especially among the Jews, on like when this kicks in. Like, if a 5-year-old hits their mom, do you kill them? Does it have to be a grown adult? There's debate on that in those circles. But either way, regardless of how you define this person, okay, if a person strikes their parent, they shall be put to death. If you know that someone did this, okay, could you keep this commandment? It's like the last commandment there. Yes, you could. You could go kill them yourself, but guess what would happen to you? You would be in jail for murder. Okay, so this is one of those ones that in 2020 America would have to go through the U.S. justice system. The courts would decide what happens to that person that hit their mother or their father. More than likely, they would not be killed for that unless the mother or father actually died. And even then, you have other penalties, life in prison, whatever. That's not a guaranteed death sentence. So this is one that, in my opinion, we really can't keep in 2020 America. Okay? Verse 16, He who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. Same thing here, a kidnapper. A kidnapper shall be put to death. Now, we can't do that. We can't just go, if somebody's kidnaps, you and I can't just go kill them, even if we have proof. It has to go through the American justice system in 2020 America. This is one that we can't keep. Not without, no, I guess technically you could, like I said on some of the other ones, you could, but you're going to be in jail, yourself. And you could end up on death row yourself. So it's not like you can just administer this justice and then just be done. In America's justice system, you're going to be on the hook if you do that. Okay? Verse 17, he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. This is one, same thing. We can't really do it. This falls in the hands of the U.S. justice system. And the U.S. justice system doesn't care if you curse your mother or father. They don't. Okay? In 2020 America, this happens all the time. You've got these spoiled, bratty, disrespectful, irreverent children out there who curse their mothers and fathers multiple times a day with complete impunity. Okay? This is one that we can't act on. If you choose to act on this and you choose to put that person to death, you'll be in jail. So I don't see how we can do this one. Okay? And like I said earlier, I'm not talking about the theological, because I know that in the New Testament, Christ was talking about, he let the woman caught in adultery go. The whole he who has not sinned cast the first stone, things like that. We have that language in the New Testament talking about, basically not putting forth penalties, especially the death penalty, when you have the right to, the obligation to. Okay, but I'm not even factoring that in. I'm just factoring nuts and bolts. Can you do this, regardless of the theological implications? Okay, these I don't see how we can. All right. Verse 18, if men have a quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die but remains in bed, if he gets up and walks around outside on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He shall only pay for his loss of time, and he shall take care of him until he is completely healed. Now, so if you and I get in a fight, okay, or whatever, and I hit you, and it hurts you, but it doesn't kill you. You're laid up in bed for a while, you can't work. Now, by that point, I didn't kill you, so nobody has to die. There's no death penalty for me. However, I am supposed to provide for you for your lost wages while you recover, and I'm supposed to help take care of you, okay, as my punishment for harming you, okay? Now, this is a commandment that we could keep. This one is possible. You don't need the legal system in this one. The legal system is irrelevant. If two men get in a fight, I saw a movie with the kids. I guess it was Sabbath night. I think it was called Those. What was it? Those Conleys or something like that. Something like that. But it was this family that lives out the woods or whatever, and the kid Bucky goes into town, and this bully challenges him to a fight or whatever. So they fist fight, and they fight. And the people in town are gathered around, and the one girl tries to stop it, and then her dad, who's the shop owner, is like, they've got some kind of score to settle, just let them go, and so they have their fight. He gets beat, they go about their business, and that's how it used to be done. People would just fight it out, and they wouldn't take each other to court after they fought. They would just fight and then be done. Okay, so if that were to happen today, if in that process of fighting you harm the person to the point to where they're laid up in bed and can't work, then you are obligated to pay for their lost wages and help them with their recovery. Okay, now that's something that typically wasn't done even in situations like I just discussed, But this is a commandment that we can keep. This is possible. Okay? And I keep saying, we can keep this one is possible, things like this. That's the whole crux of this, If you can keep a commandment, you should. If you cannot, then don't. It's irrelevant. Okay? And we know from the writer of Hebrews that Jesus didn't even keep all the commandments. He didn't keep the Levitical stuff because he was not a Levite. He was from the tribe of Judah. So even he, although he kept the law flawlessly, made no mistakes, committed no sin, he did not keep every commandment. So that's why I'm doing this study, and just to kind of reiterate that, is to show that you cannot keep all the commandments. Nobody can. But we can identify the ones we're able to. We can identify the ones that apply to us, and we can choose to keep them. Okay? So to continue, verse 20, if a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. If, however, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property. Now, in 2020 America, can you own a slave? No. Not lawfully, not legally. Okay? So, we can't keep this commandment because A, you can't have a slave. So, this is talking about if you have a slave and you beat them, this is what happens. Okay? Since we cannot have slaves in 2020 America, then this commandment's irrelevant. You can't really keep it. Okay? If men struggle with each other, this is verse 22, and strike a woman with child so that she gives birth prematurely, yet there is no injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, burn for. Okay, so if two men are fighting with each other, and there's a pregnant woman around, and she gets hit, okay, and it causes her to give birth prematurely. Now, if the child is not injured, if the birth goes normally and the child is fine, then the husband will levy a penalty against the one who hit his wife, okay, and he has to pay that penalty. If the child is harmed in any way, then the one who hit the wife, who hit the woman, has to be hurt in that same way. So if that child comes out blind, I presume you would gouge out the offender's eyes, that kind of thing, all right? So right here, I mean, this is one that could be kept, in 2020 America. It talks about the judges, so that's the only real hang-up here, because it's talking about the biblical judges, the 70 judges that are established in Torah, okay? That's who's supposed to make this ruling. Now, we don't have that now in 2020 America. It would go through the actual criminal justice system, through the courts. They might make this decision. I doubt if they would do the whole eye for eye thing. Probably not. But they could go with monetary penalties. They could go with prison time, different things like that. So the modern courts could levy some kind of punishment, but it wouldn't be exactly like what we read here. So this is one that, in theory, on paper, we could probably keep, but in reality, it's just not going to happen the way it's written. Okay? Verse 26, if a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he shall let him go free on account of his eye. And if he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let him go free on account of his tooth. Again, 2020 America, you can't own slaves, so you can't keep this commandment. It's impossible. All right? Verse 28, if an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall surely be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall go unpunished. If, however, an ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, yet he does not confine it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. If a ransom is demanded of him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is demanded of him. Whether it gores a son or a daughter, it shall be done to him according to the same rule. If the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall give his or her master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. So there's a lot to look at here. First, it's talking specifically about an ox, if your ox gores somebody. Now, like with anything else, you can take this specific animal and you can say, well, the principle could apply to anyone. So if you have a dog, or if you have a goat, or if you have, a saber-toothed tiger, whatever your animal is, and it harms somebody, you could apply these same principles. So there's two ways to look at it. Literally, only an ox, or more generally, any animal that you may own. Either way, okay? But let's take a look at this. If the person dies, then the animal is stoned and you don't eat its flesh, okay? The owner of the ox goes unpunished, okay? Now, if the ox has gotten out and has harmed people before, and the owner knew it, and the owner didn't take the steps to confine it properly, and it got loose and killed somebody, then at that point, you kill the ox and the owner. Now, this is one where I don't really see how we can keep it in modern America, because just with any of these other death penalties, we can't just go kill this person. We'll end up in jail ourselves. It would have to go through the justice system, okay? So how they would rule on something like this, I don't know. but we can't just go and kill this person, all right? We could potentially do the killing of the ox and things like that, but even then you have certain laws in certain states regarding like animal cruelty and things like that. So I don't even know if we could do that. Sometimes if a dog, if like say a dog mauls somebody and kills it, they'll put the dog down, or if a bear mauls somebody, they'll put the bear down. So maybe that would be the same case here. But the owner of the animal, you're probably not going to be able just to go out and kill them this way, okay? Now it does talk about a ransom, so you could have that person, instead of killing them, you could have them pay a certain amount of money and then allow them to live, okay? And then in verse 32, it talks about what to do if the ox gores a male or a female slave. Since we can't own slaves, that part's irrelevant, okay? So moving right along, verse 33, if a man opens a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it over, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead animal shall become his. Now, this is one that I think we can do. If you dig a pit or a hole and you don't cover it, and somebody's animal gets in it and is hurt, then you pay for the animal, okay? And then, if the animal dies, then you get the dead animal, okay? So this is something that can be done. There's no reason why we couldn't do this. The legal system doesn't have to get involved. There's really no technical reasons why we couldn't do this. And finally, verse 35, if one man's ox hurts another's so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and divide its price equally. And also they shall divide the dead ox. Or if it is known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, yet its owner has not confined it, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead animal shall become his. Now with this commandment, same thing. It's talking about, an animal getting out loose and doing harm to someone else's animal. There's no death penalty here for a human, so the courts don't have to be involved. This is one that I think we can keep. Okay? Now as I say that, if you're following along with me, you may come to a different conclusion. You may look at a commandment and say, well, I disagree, James. We can't keep that. And that's fine. But the whole point of this exercise is to actually have those thoughts, is to actually look at these and say, can I keep this? Because Christianity doesn't read the commandments in general. Okay, we don't. When we go into the Old Testament, we read the stories. Okay, we don't read the nuts and bolts commandments because Christianity generally doesn't think that they apply. Now they will go in and read them in certain instances if they think it's got some relevance to something, especially the Ten Commandments. But generally speaking, there's really no practical need in Christianity to go through the commandments because they don't believe you need to keep them. So you're kind of wasting your time. All right? So that's it. That's the end of chapter 21. That's all I'm going to cover tonight. I hope so far you're tracking with me. If you listened to the last teaching and to this one, I'm hoping that this is something that you can see yourself joining me with in the future because, like I said, I plan to go all the way through Deuteronomy on this. And if I'm going chapter by chapter, this is going to take a while. Like I said last night, there will be some places I will skip because with the Levitical commandments, stuff to do with like the priestly garments and all the intricacies of the priesthood, you and I can't keep those because we don't even know if we're Levites and we don't have a standing tabernacle or temple. So it's impossible for anyone walking the earth right now to keep those commandments. So going through those and saying can we or cannot keep those commandments is a waste of time. So when we get to those, I'm planning on skipping them, okay? Just because there's no need to go through that. So we're not going to go through every single chapter and every single commandment, but we're going to go through all the ones that are non-Levitical that may possibly apply to you and me in 2020 America. And then we'll take a look, can we not keep those? So hopefully this series is a blessing so far. I'm excited to finally be doing this. It's something that I've been looking forward to a while, and I've just wanted to do for a while. So I'm feeling really good to be able to come on and do this. I did get the video, maybe I mentioned this earlier, I did get the video from last night put up on YouTube in a playlist. It's called The Commandments, easy to find. So as I do these teachings, I'm going to put them over on YouTube in that playlist so you don't have to comb through my Facebook to find them. They're right there in one nice, neat, sequential order to go through, okay? So just a bit of housekeeping here, I guess, before I wrap up. I do have technology issues with this. I'm streaming on my phone right now. which is completely dependent on internet connection, and sometimes that gives me problems, things like that. So I am looking to eventually upgrade to where I can, record in decent audio and video, and then put it up as a recording. That way, I don't have to worry about the internet connections, things like that. I could maybe run it through a video editing software, put some graphics up, actually put the verses on screen, things like that. I don't have the technology to do that right now, so I'm considering, haven't decided yet, I'm considering maybe putting up a Patreon account for anybody who's interested in that, to come in and do like a $5 subscription or whatever. And I'm just anything that you put in that would go strictly towards that purpose, as far as equipment to actually quote unquote do this right. So if that's something that you think would be beneficial, something you'd be interested in, let me know, in a PM or something, and I'll just kind of gauge the interest and see, because I don't want to get it set up and then like have nothing happen. But if that's something that you'd be interested in contributing to, if it's something that you think would be beneficial, then let me know. I'll entertain it, and see if that's something that's workable or not. But for the time being, we'll just go, we'll go lo-fi here with the phone, and it works when it works and doesn't when it doesn't. Anyway, I hope you all have a good night. I'll have this hopefully put up on YouTube tomorrow, and Yahweh bless.